Namaskaram, I am Saravanan. In this short video, we'll talk about the science of breath. If you ask me, the yogic system has the most in-depth science of breath because it relates breath with consciousness, mind, and the health of the body. As per yoga, the material body, that is a physical form, is the final output of the breath. The origin happens from emptiness. From emptiness, you have consciousness. Consciousness converts into life force, or what we call as prana. Prana converts into what we call as breath. Breath then manifests as a first gross form as the mind, which we still cannot see, and the mind manifests as lungs. So this is the basis of creation, where consciousness or emptiness slowly manifests as lungs in a human body or in an animal body. If you need to correlate this, we will all know that when the breath leaves the body dies. Yes or no? That's why most people today, they die in a ventilator. Ventilator is the last place where they are somehow the body, they try to revive life, they try to revive the body. So when the breath leaves, then the body dies. Even in a ventilator, what do? What does a person die when they are in a ventilator? Now, let us go deeper into breath. Most of us know or have been taught that air contains oxygen, carbon dioxide. We take in oxygen and oxygen gives us life. That is what we have been told. Now, what do they do in a ventilator? They give oxygen in a calibrated manner into the body. So if oxygen can give life, oxygen inside air can give life, then will a person ever die? It's not possible, correct? So yes, it is sure that air has oxygen and oxygen is needed for life. That is true. But in addition to oxygen, there is something which is there, which is the one that sustains life. That is what we call as prana. So we have air. In air is contained inside the breath, but both of them are carried by what we call as prana or the life force. So to summarize, you have emptiness, from emptiness consciousness, from consciousness you have the life force slightly becomes more grosser to form breath. It starts carrying oxygen in the air and it enters, creates the lungs. From the lungs you get the body. So what happens in the lungs? Blood goes inside the lungs. The carbon dioxide is taken away by the lungs, and oxygen along with life energy is given into the blood by the lungs, and then the blood goes into the heart. From the heart it travels all through the body. So this is a science. Now let us understand why breathwork is important. As per yoga and as per pranic healing, lack of prana or lack of life energy in the system is the basis of disease. It can be mental disease, it can be physiological disease. Disease happens because there is less prana or constricted flow of prana in the body. We may not be able to sense it. And there are enough studies in pranic science which show that before a disease manifests in the body as a disease, the pranic flow will be obstructed. If you go to a pranic healer, they will just scan the prana and say, you may get this disease after some time because the prana into that particular organ is reduced now. Right. Similarly, yoga also says, based on the movement, based on the flexibility of the body, based on the type of breathing a person is, whether there may be disease later or not. So ultimately, disease is always linked with prana. When disease is linked with prana, we should also understand life is also linked with prana. What do you mean by that? If I need to be alive, vibrant, fully active, I need prana. There are enough examples which I have from my own personal life, from the life of students, sharing of students, that if they're able to do systematic yoga continuously 1 hour every day for around 2 to 3 weeks, the quantum of sleep comes down, the quantum of food comes down. I'm talking about right yoga because yoga with the right breath work, with the right movement, with the right inhale-exhale ratios. If it is done right, then the amount of energy in the body increases, the prana increases. When the prana in the body increases, the amount of food needed comes down, gross food, and the amount of sleep needed also comes down. Now let's come back to the breath. So what did we understand? Breath contains air, that's the air element. Within the air element, you have oxygen, carbon dioxide. Oxygen is taken inside the system. Breath also has prana, which is a life giver, the source of life. Now, people say that we use normally, if we use around 80% of the lung capacity, we can be healthy. A normal healthy person can use 70 to 80% of the total lung capacity, which means the lung can hold up to 6 liters of air. 6 liters of air. And a healthy person, really healthy person, can breathe out around 5 liters of air over a period of a minute. Now, let's leave that aside. Now, 80% of lung capacity means at any given point of time, every minute, the amount of oxygen that goes inside and carbon dioxide that should come out should actually balance itself. If the lungs have to function in full capacity, it's very simple logic to understand because the lung is inside the rib cage. If the lung has to expand, the rib cage has to expand. Between those ribs, you have muscles. Those muscles, the intercostal muscle, should be elastic enough. So you expand and contract. So for a healthy lung capacity, you need a rib cage that can expand and contract. You need lungs that can expand well and contract. There are studies which show that as a person gets more diseased, the lung capacity starts reducing, which means the amount of air inhaled by a person comes down. I have personally seen people with anxiety, panic attacks, IBS, and even stressed. You can find it by yourself. When you're working in an office, you're extremely stressed, breath is very shallow. You just forget the breath. Breath keeps on happening, you just keep typing or do whatever you want. You don't breathe, you're not conscious of the breath. Breath becomes very shallow. When breath becomes very shallow, what happens? The amount of oxygen that comes inside the system is less. The amount of life energy that comes inside the system is less. When the oxygen which is needed for the survival of the body, for the well-being of the body, is reduced, what will happen? The organs will start feeling oxygen starvation. Amount of oxygen is less. So all the oxygen will be directed towards the most important of the vital organs, which we call as the brain, the heart, liver, stomach, and lungs. So on other organs, oxygen would be very less. So basically, when you are stressed, when the breath rate goes up, the depth of the breath doesn't increase, the breath rate goes up, the amount of oxygen that comes inside reduces. When that reduces, there is starvation in the body, that leads to more stress, then it leads to anxiety. Now, for people who are anxious or fearful, proper breath work, 3 days, they'll feel at peace. Why 3 days? Make them breathe properly for 15 minutes. They walk out more peacefully. The thing is, they're not able to believe it. They don't believe because how come the whole thing will get solved? I thought they had to do this, I have to do that, I have to do something complicated. But the truth is this, if you make a person lie down and make him breathe properly, then actually the chemistry changes. What chemistry changes? You have more oxygen into the system, you have more life inside the system. That brings out a neurochemical change within the body. There are a lot of studies which show that today. Once you are able to trigger the body to generate a healthy neurological chemistry within, your disposition changes, you become positive and confident. So that is basically how breath influences the system. Many people ask, because there are many of my students who say, why are you just focusing on breath? Now, let's come to the most important question. Why do we do yoga with breath? Or what is the difference between yoga and a normal physical exercise? If you look into statistics, they say that when a person is engaging in physical exercise, like walking or even gymming, the lung capacity increases and they take in at around 40 liters of air inside. Now, the breath rate also increases. Because normally a human being breathes around 15 minutes. Now, you start exercising, you start walking, the breath rate goes up, right? When the breath rate goes up, amount of oxygen that comes inside, the air comes inside goes up. It is good, it is needed. Yes, that's a different science. Let us understand what happens if we are experiencing stress in life, we want to calm down the system and become more perceptive, and we are practicing mindfulness, we want to be more conscious. Hatha Yoga Pradipika clearly states that breath and the mind are by and large one, which means When the breath gets disturbed, the mind gets disturbed. We don't know where the mind is. So you regulate the breath, you regulate the mind. It also says breath is life, which means the number of breaths increases in the system. Then you are also breathing more, and yes, disease will be fast. It's like this. The heart, just like a battery which is designed for certain cycles, after around 30,000 or 40,000 charging, a battery will go off. Similarly, there is the heart and the lungs are designed for certain amount of breathing in a lifetime. Number of breaths are determined. Now, if we breathe shallow, it is still counted as 1, which means you're breathing normally, you breathe 15 comfortable breaths a minute, it is 15. You are stressed, you don't even know you're breathing, but breathing is happening mechanically. The number of breath increases to 30, 40, but very shallow, it is still counted as 40, which means the lung loses its capacity to expand and contract. Breathing is very shallow, it just goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, the question is, how do we change it? When it comes to exercise, as I told, though the amount of oxygen, the amount of air that goes inside the system is very high, breathing is also very high, the breath rate also is high. So, what happens to the mind, we may not know. When it comes to yoga, we are consciously increasing the quantum of breath, the quantum of inhale and the quantum of exhale. We say inhale, count of 4 or 5, exhale to a count of 7 or 8. Again, I am giving an example. This again depends upon the individual's age, gender, condition of disease, what is the goal. There are many things involved in it. But generally, we say make your exhale longer than inhale consciously. And when you do it consciously, please imagine if you are able to inhale for 4 to 5 seconds and exhale for around 10 seconds. One breath takes 15 minutes, 15 seconds, and in a minute you are taking only 4 breaths. So what happens? Without increasing the breath rate, you are increasing the quantum of oxygen, life energy inside the system. And when the breath rate is coordinated, regulated well, then automatically the mind stabilizes because the fluctuations of the mind comes down. And when we do this systematically for around 45 minutes to 60 minutes, what happens? The mind is fully calm. It's not only that, the mind is calm, and since you're consciously breathing in and breathing out, there's a technique for that. You are actually training the lungs to expand well. We are training the rib cage to expand well and contract well. We are improving the elasticity of the lungs, the elasticity of the intercostal muscles, the opening of the chest, and all these things contribute to increased vital capacity, which basically means if you do it regularly for around 2 months, even if you are in the office, doing some work, forgetting yourself, the body will start breathing normally.